Item number 8, public hearings. We're going to hold a public hearing and adopt a resolution. Number 1, certifying the final supplemental environmental impact report to the U.S. Navy site and its Environs Specific Plan Amendment, and adopting environmental findings and a mitigation monitoring reporting program. And number 2, approving an amendment to the U.S. Navy site and its Environs Specific Plan related to the Crossing Hotel site. David?
Good evening, Mayor and Council members. The item before you tonight is consideration of an amendment to the Navy Site and Environs Specific Plan that was adopted in 2001, as well as a supplemental environmental impact report that was prepared for the proposed specific plan amendment. I'd like to point out that the purpose of this agenda item is to consider amending U.S. Navy Site and Environs Specific Plan, as well as certification of the Supplemental Environmental Impact Report, SEIR. This agenda item is not for the purpose of considering any specific development project or projects or financial aspects or implications of any possible development project or projects. So with that, I'd like to proceed with the staff report. The Navy site and its environment-specific plan, the specific plan being considered for amendment, was adopted in 2001 and was fully evaluated in an accompanying environmental impact report that was accepted and certified for the adoption of this specific plan. The Navy site specific plan area comprises about 20 acres of land on the west side of El Camino Real across from the shops at Tanforan. It's in the northwest quadrant of Highway 380 and El Camino Real. The intent of the specific plan was to create a mixed-use, transit-oriented development that would also be pedestrian-friendly. The idea was to include a broad range, a broad variety of land uses, both residential and commercial, and to include a hotel use as a key component that could support important meeting and gathering needs and interests of the San Bruno community. The hotel was seen as a very important aspect of the land use scheme for this planning area. The original specific plan allowed for development of a hotel project up to about 7 stories and up to about 500 rooms on a 5.5 acre site. Additionally, it was envisioned that there could be up to 15,000 square feet of supporting commercial space, including meeting rooms and a restaurant, a full-service restaurant. This larger hotel opportunity never gained market support. And as occurs at times with changing economic conditions, there were requests for amendments to this specific plan along the way. For example, in 2001, the city approved an amendment to allow flex office and residential sites within the specific plan area because of extremely weak commercial office conditions. This amendment allowed for the construction of a significant amount of housing in the plan area. 1,063 multiple family housing units were constructed in the plan area, including 325 affordable housing units, 228 of those units being affordable to seniors here in this community. The shift to housing, however, resulted in the loss of the commercial office component and an anticipated above-ground parking garage that would have been shared in the future by a hotel. And then in 2005, there was another amendment. This amendment to the specific plan allowed for the El Camino Real commercial project that includes about 4,000 square feet of full-service dining space for Jack's Restaurant. This development is approximately 12,500 square feet in overall area. The combination of the 2001 and 2005 amendments resulted in development projects that reduced the former 5.5-acre development site for a hotel to approximately 1.5 acres. So changing economic conditions in the community during this period, a period when the originally envisioned 500-room hotel there was no market for, reduced the site from 5.5 acres to about 1.5 acres. Yet the city did see the development of about 12,500 square feet of supporting commercial space, including Jack's Restaurant, a fine dining full-service restaurant. This current specific plan amendment essentially proposes to make changes to the Navy site and its environment specific plan to reflect the potential hotel opportunity on the smaller 1.5 acre site. Further, the city has prepared, as required by the California Environmental Quality Act, an evaluation of the smaller hotel site and potential hotel. And the CEQA review is required because of possible new information, changed conditions, etc., that may have occurred since the previously certified EIR. The specific plan amendment assumes, for evaluation purposes, the 1.5 acre site and a hotel of about 152 rooms. The CEQA evaluation prepared by the city is a detailed environmental initial study and a supplemental environmental impact report. The amendment would revise the hotel description in the land use and development standards sections of the specific plan as follows. This information is in your staff report. So for example, the site goes from 5.5 to 1.5 acres. The hotel type goes from a full-service hotel to a select-service hotel. Number of rooms from up to 500 to up to 152. In terms of height, instead of 7 stories, we'd be looking at, say, 5 stories, 70 to 73 feet. Parking, the parking standards would be similar, but for a smaller hotel. And the assumption is that the parking would be on site, either surface parking or below grade subterranean parking. Conference and meeting space, overall commercial space, as I mentioned earlier, would have been about 15,000 square feet. As anticipated as possible, about 3,000 square feet was analyzed in the environmental impact report, the SEIR, and that would be for meetings and gatherings. And again, keep in mind that the city did see the development of 12,500 square feet of commercial space along El Camino Real. So when you put the two together, the 3,000 square feet analyzed in this environmental document for a possible future hotel with this amendment and the 12,500 square feet, that's very comparable to the 15,000 square feet of overall commercial space originally anticipated in 2001. And then the specific plan amendment assumes that a future hotel at this site would be more energy efficient, and in fact that it would include 6,000 square feet of solar photovoltaic panels on the rooftop. So what about the city's objectives as we move forward, kind of looking at the past, kind of going forward with this specific plan amendment? Again, the specific plan amendment is essentially kind of truing up changes that have been made along the way. But what have been the city's objectives in terms of the specific plan? Creating a mixed-use transit-oriented development. Creating a land-use development scheme that really helps the long-term economic vitality and sustainability of the city. Encouraging a compatible mix of land uses, housing, commercial, etc. Establishing development standards, establishing design guidelines, establishing links to other portions of the community. The general plan goals and objectives talk about similar objectives, land uses that help support nearby BART and Caltrain, that stimulate multi-use transit-oriented development, that would establish for an opportunity for a high-quality hotel, and an opportunity to capture spillover economic uses from SFO. So those are some of the objectives, both in the specific plan and the general plan, that we continue to work with as we focus in on this specific plan amendment. Now, the environmental review for the specific plan amendment that we're considering tonight involved initially preparation of an initial study, and then the identification of 3 possible areas where there could be potentially significant environmental impacts. Those areas are air quality, climate change and greenhouse gases, and transportation and circulation. The analysis was completed by ESA Associates along with city staff. Carl Heisler is here this evening in the audience. He was a key preparer of the document. Based on their thorough analysis with staff, it was determined with some additional mitigation measures and modifications to mitigation measures, and including an anticipated solar component on a future hotel development, that there's no anticipated significant adverse impact as a result of moving forward with the proposed specific plan amendment. This SEIR did look at alternatives, as is typical and required of an environmental document like this. There was a no project alternative. Now keep in mind, as projects are evaluated in an environmental document, the idea is not just to look at the environmental impacts that may result, but also to look at the applicants, in this case the city's objectives for, in this case, the specific plan amendment, the specific plan area. And keep in mind, key objectives had to do with creating the opportunity for a hotel, creating the opportunity for spillover economic benefits from SFO, creating the opportunity for long-term financial gain and a more sustainable economic future for the community. 3 alternatives were evaluated in the SEIR, in the environmental document. A no project alternative. Of course, the no project alternative, no project, would result in fewer environmental impacts, but also there would be no development on the site. So in terms of transit-oriented development and TOT tax, in terms of sales tax, property tax, these tax benefits would not come to the city. So that alternative really doesn't achieve the objectives of the city. And then a lesser development alternative was evaluated as well, a 140-room hotel versus up to 152-room hotel. And yes, that would result in fewer environmental impacts, but also less economic return for the city. The 152 or up to 152-room hotel opportunity for the future with mitigation measures would not result in any new significant adverse environmental impacts and would result in the most economic return of the alternatives evaluated in the environmental document. The Planning Commission reviewed this specific plan amendment and the SEIR and the information in your staff report. And the Planning Commission, although concerned about the reduced size of the project over what was originally anticipated here at the site, the Planning Commission did acknowledge the changing economic conditions over time and how we came to where we are today. And the Planning Commission did unanimously recommend to the City Council that you certify the SEIR and that you adopt the specific plan. And I'd like to point out that, in terms of the development in the specific plan area, in the crossing area as we know it, there have been development and mitigation fees collected to a tune of about $1.2 million. There was $1 million contributed toward El Camino Real, Commodore intersection and signal improvements. There were, as I mentioned earlier, over 1,000 multifamily dwelling units created here in this community, 325 of which are affordable units. Also, the commercial development along El Camino Real, the El Camino Real commercial development, including the Jack's restaurant. As I've indicated, the environmental review has been completed. We do not anticipate, with mitigation measures, any significant environmental impacts, any new significant environmental impacts. In terms of fiscal impact of the specific plan amendment, again, we're looking at a specific plan amendment. We're not looking at a project at this time. At this time, the site is not developed. In the future, there would be the opportunity with a project to see a return to the city, but at this time, the site is undeveloped. Future development, though, we would anticipate would result in transient occupancy tax, sales tax, and property tax to the community. Tonight, the Planning Commission and the staff is recommending to you to go forward and hold your public hearing and adopt the two resolutions that the mayor cited in his introduction. One, certifying the final environmental impact report for the U.S. Navy site and its environment-specific plan amendment, and adopting environmental findings and a mitigation monitoring and reporting program. And two, approving an amendment to the U.S. Navy site and its environment-specific plan related to the Crossing Hotel site. We've attached the two resolutions along with the exhibits to those resolutions to your staff report. That concludes my report. Again, the preparer of the environmental document is here in the audience. Mr. Heisler and I would be pleased to answer any questions you may have. Thank you.
Any questions for David before we open the public hearing? Ken?
Yes, Mr. Mayor. So, David, all we are discussing today is a revision to the original specific plan for a hotel. So
Yes.
any other consideration to, say, let's talk about what else we could build, or cannot be part of this approval? So explain what it would take if a suggestion that we don't even consider a hotel anymore.
I'd be happy to respond to that. First off, as I indicated at the outset, and as you've alluded to, Councilmember, the purpose of tonight's meeting is to consider the specific plan amendment. You know, as I said, it's kind of truing up, in a sense, changes that were made in 2001 and 2005, and the resulting development changes that have occurred, resulting in the 1.5-acre site. At this point, the evaluation, both the evaluation in terms of the specific plan amendment and what could occur on that reduced area site, we've laid out in terms of specific amendments that would occur in the specific plan. This is not about a development project. This is about amendments to the specific plan that establish parameters for what could be a development project in the future, and an environmental impact report that evaluates the impact of those amendments. This is not about a particular development project. A particular development project would need to come forward separately in the future. It would need to be consistent with these amendments. It would go through its own review before the city's Architecture Review Committee, Planning Commission, and City Council.
But if I could follow up, that future project that would come forward would have to be a hotel.
Yes.
Okay. And if there was hypothetically, if the majority of this council said, okay, now that we have a revised or a supplemental environmental impact report and approval, it is zoned hotel for all intents and purposes, what would it take to change that use to
Sure.
say office?
I'll be happy
Or
to
whatever.
respond to that. So, as you indicated, and I confirmed, this would allow for a future hotel. To allow for a different land use, you mentioned office, there would be a need to amend the specific plan separately and further to consider an office use on this site, and to do a related environmental review of that proposed use. So it would be a separate action. It would need to go to the Planning Commission and to the City Council at notice public hearings, and it would need to be supported by its own environmental document and review. That would be a completely separate action.
Anyone else? Questions for David? Michael?
Thank you. I'm wondering, currently, the way it's set up right now, we've basically set it up for a much larger hotel. Now we're talking about scaling it back, but a lot of the language that I saw in there was up to a certain number, and there were no hard, in fact, numbers, but rather upper limits, and we're setting now lower upper limits. But I'm wondering why we couldn't just leave the plan as it is and still move forward with what's being proposed without making any changes to what's in there.
The current specific plan suggests a 5.5 acre site. It's not a 5.5 acre site. It's a 1.5 acre site. So in terms of the description of the site and what could be, it's not accurate. So a specific plan like this, a planning document like this, is used by developers, staff, decision makers, other interested parties. The current information does not accurately reflect either the site conditions or the potential project that could occur. So by amending this specific plan to acknowledge the changes that have occurred over time, the site area and the potential project and thresholds, provides a more accurate summation of what could be on the site and is really the appropriate thing to do.
If I may just follow up on that answer for a moment. So David is correct, but also in addition to that, it's important for the council to remember that just because the project is a smaller project on a smaller site than was previously envisioned, the city can't automatically assume that it's going to have no environmental impact. So in addition to that, since 2001, various standards have changed. For example, there was the requirement to analyze greenhouse gases. Air quality standards changed. So all of those things had to be taken into consideration, and that's the reason why a new, essentially full supplemental EIR had to be done. We couldn't just say, oh, it's a smaller hotel on a smaller site, there must not be any environmental impact. Those are really some additional reasons.
Okay. So if, as we move forward in our planning, if there was a plan to possibly take some of the developed area and encompass the hotel, to merge into that somehow, or basically start over on some of those things, and we've locked ourselves down, then are we then going to have to go back through this whole process again? And really my point is this premature? Should we wait till there's a real project to look at and then go through this process? Or should we go through it and then possibly have to come back and do it again because we've painted ourselves into a corner?
I don't think we've painted ourselves into a corner. I think we're reflecting existing and current conditions. And as both the city attorney and I have said, it's kind of twofold. One, we're trying to present an accurate description of what's there and what's possible. We're also trying to make sure that in terms of CEQA, the California Environmental Quality Act, if someone would come forward with a proposed project, they're positioned based on current knowledge of CEQA and the project area and other information that they could go forward. At any point, really, at any point in the community, somebody could come forward and request an amendment to a general plan or a specific plan that can be generated by the council, the commission, or privately. So if somebody would want to come forward and suggest something different, they could. And there's a process to do that. Like I mentioned a little bit earlier, there's a formal amendment process that would go before the Planning Commission and City Council. But in terms of where we are today, this specific plan amendment that's before you, it accurately describes the site, its conditions, its opportunity, and it brings us current in terms of the California Environmental Quality Act and its requirements. So it brings us current in terms of conditions and state law.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? At this time, we'll open the public hearing. Would anyone from the public like to address the council on this matter? If we close the public hearing, it's going to preclude you from speaking on this to us again. So any action by the council? Close the public hearing.
So moved.
Second.
Motion and second to close the public hearing on the question. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Any further discussion or action by the council?
If I could.
Ken?
I guess my comment, it's not a question, but I can really appreciate your summary as to what these 20 acres have produced to this community. I sit up here and remember 3 of these council members in 1999, seeing a former federally owned property, 20 acres, which was producing zero revenue for this city. And so what went through my mind as you were listing the entitlements that have come, the improvements that have come, 1,000 units, which we didn't think much of until now that we have a housing crisis. We've done our share as far as housing. The fact that we had to make tough decisions to do more housing because there was no market for office, and waiting for a vacant lot for a hotel over 15 years or almost 15 years. It just, what I'm proud of is that we were receiving zero. And even though we've gotten all these, and we've done entitlements, we've done subsidies for many of these projects, the property tax, the value of these 20 acres, even though we still have 1.5 acres of dirt, is really surprising even to me, knowing what's gone through. So I believe that we're still looking for that last piece of the puzzle for the hotel. And I believe, and I think it needs to be stated, at least from my standpoint, is that we've been watching these whole 15 years. We did not miss an opportunity. We were always watching, and the owners of the property, Saris Regis and TMG developers, they wanted to back out, and every opportunity we said, no, we're going to stand firm. We will stand firm because we know this area, and we know that at some point San Bruno is going to have that opportunity. And I think that time has come. Mm-hmm. So even though it's not the flagship hotel, and I think we were setting our sights pretty high to have a Hyatt or a Marriott or something here, I think we're going to get something what we're proud of. So I will stop at that.
Okay. Anyone else? Any action by the council on these 2 resolutions?
I'll introduce the resolution if there's no further comment.
We need to do them separately, Mark?
Yes, please, through the chair, if you could do the first resolution being the one on the environmental impact report, and then the second one being the one on the specific plan amendment.
Okay.
Thank you.
I'd like to introduce the resolution for environmental, for the environmental impact report, please.
Councilmember Ibarra.
Aye.
Councilmember O'Connell. Aye. Councilmember Medina.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Salazar.
Aye.
Mayor Ruane.
Aye.
To introduce a resolution to amend the specific plan.
Councilmember Ibarra.
Aye.
Councilmember O'Connell. Aye. Councilmember Medina.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Salazar.
Aye.
Mayor Ruane.
Aye.